Amendment by Romero.
Mr. Romero.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Members, this amendment is much more narrow than the prior one. This just simply addresses those that have a deferred status, otherwise known as DACA. So, members, if you want to take a position on those kids that have also presented themselves or going to our schools, likely already going off to great careers, please support your DACA recipients.
Mr. Smith in opposition.
Mr. Romero, I've discussed this as well. And the problem with DACA is it's the deferred action of childhood arrivals. And it's not really what you would call lawful presence in the country, but what it is a deferred action on your status that allows certain individuals to stay in our country for a limited period of time. It has to be renewed. It's not a law. It was done by executive order by President Obama, and it's subject right now, I think, to some court challenges. And the current administration has indicated a willingness to suspend DACA.
Mr. Speaker,
Ms. Gonzalez, for what purpose?
does the gentleman yield?
Gentleman yield for questions?
Give me 1 second, Ms. Gonzalez, and I will.
Not at this time.
And so if you're a DACA eligible, or even if you're a DACA recipient, you are subject to being to the ICE hold. In other words, if you're accused or charged with committing a crime, particularly these crimes that are in our resolution, you will be subject to a DACA, to an ICE hold. You will not get out of jail. And so to that extent, this resolution doesn't really change anything. If we release them on the state level, the federal government will take custody of them under the hold. And so, as I said, we broadened we narrowed the people that we're going to capture here over what the federal government does on ICE holds, and also the Senate version. But we finally had to come down. And honestly, if you're a DACA recipient or a DACA eligible person, that doesn't mean you're not going to commit a serious crime. And if they do commit a serious crime, or if there's probable cause to believe they have committed a serious crime, we don't want them back out on the streets. And so this doesn't apply to all DACA eligible people. It just applies to those who have been found to have probable cause to have committed a very, very serious crime. And I'll yield.
Ms. Gonzalez, for what purpose?
Does the gentleman yield?
Gentleman yield for
Yes.
questions? He yields for questions.
Listening to your opposition of the amendment made me think that if you said the federal government's already going to capture them in their usage of DACA, we wouldn't need that. We should just maintain the bill as a status quo. But I guess my thing is, why not include them as an exemption? Because to your argument, the Fed's already going to do that.
Well, as I've said with all the other categories, everybody that we pick up in this, as far as I know, is going to be subject to an ICE hold. They will be subject to an ICE hold. So the practical effect of this, it's not going to increase jail populations by any significant numbers. All we're aiming for are the people who don't get caught with the detention. And if we bail those people out and they know there's a detention either coming or should have come, all we're doing is giving them a head start on the federal authorities. That's all we're doing.
I think what the concern, Chairman, is that there are lots of members on this floor who have seen some of our DACA students be targeted at universities currently right now through what's happening in the larger political climate. And there's fear and anxiety around that. And so by accepting this amendment, you would be really trying to say, okay, there are concerns about what's happening. There are certain students who are being targeted. We have seen actual news stories where they have been charged of something in which they did not do. And to make sure that they are not caught up, accidentally, we are not going to be those types of individuals. Let's make sure they're exempt for now.
Well, we discussed this at great length. I mean, this wasn't done casually or carelessly. We discussed and seriously considered including DACA, not necessarily DACA eligible, but DACA recipients in here. And the consensus was that if even a DACA recipient has committed a crime of the magnitude that we've described in here, to err on the side of public safety and the safety of children and vulnerable people in this state, we would go ahead and apply this even to DACA recipients because they are not permanently in this country. And once again, DACA basically is a program that is a grace program that grants grace to people who are not in the country legally.
Chairman, I understand DACA very clearly what DACA is. I understand it is a deferred action program, but what I am trying to express to you, and I think a lot of members on this floor, is that we have anxiety not exempting them because of them being targeted right now and may not have actually committed a crime. So that being said, I appreciate you answering the questions.
Thank you.
Christina Hernandez, for what purpose?
Does the gentleman yield for questions?
Gentleman yield for
Certainly.
questions. He yields for questions.
Thank you, Chairman. I also had some follow-up questions from my fellow colleague as well. I do, like I said earlier, I do a ton of DACA applicants. I've been doing it since the very beginning of the program, and I've seen it transpire from when it was DACA, and then DAPA was created, and then, of course, we know DAPA ended up, the court struck that down, but DACA is still a program that's still being utilized right now. It doesn't accept new applicants, but those who qualified under the program can continue to keep applying every 2 years to renew it, always having to produce if whether there's been any criminal instances. They have to go through the background check, they have to do the fingerprints and everything like that. And that's how the federal government makes sure that these particular individuals who are availing themselves of this program are making sure that they're out working, they have work authorization in order to contribute to the economy. But if they ever get caught up in any type of particular criminal offenses, they in fact can lose their access to that program. And so I do understand of why exactly and how y'all have crafted to include some individuals. I do feel like, in particular, DACA should be included as well. You had said earlier about individuals who have come here to the U.S. and availed themselves, but DACA applicants, people who are currently under that program, these weren't adults that crossed over and came to our country. These were children who were brought by their parents. They didn't have a say one way or another of whether they wanted to come here to the U.S. And so I understand the hesitance and the concern of a lot of people in our community. We see it even on the congressional level where there seems to be some agreement on both sides of the aisle that there's something that we need to do for these particular individuals. And so I am concerned of us being able to avail them ourselves and being able to avail ourselves of the U.S. Supreme Court case, which is the Salerno case, that says that each individual is entitled to having their determination on bond, that these particular individuals, these now many of them adults who were brought here as children, did not actually make the decision to come here in the U.S. Essentially very similar to a lot of us, some of them close to my age now, who this is the only country they've ever known. Those particular individuals, I don't necessarily want to see caught up, and I just don't know whether there's any way that we might be able to find middle ground in allowing these particular individuals in this instance. But I do think that they certainly shouldn't necessarily be lumped in with all of the other categories of adult individuals who maybe have entered this country when in fact many of them never had the choice to make it. And so I'm just wondering if whether there may be any room for us to potentially discuss that or have those particular individuals added to this.
Well, I'll tell you, we're not treating DACA recipients any much differently than we are U.S. citizens here. Because if you're a U.S. citizen and you are accused of any of these crimes, and the only difference is that you have to prove two things on a U.S. citizen. You have to prove that they either pose a flight risk or they pose a danger to society. We take that away in this amendment because we believe that citizenship in the United States, whether it's acquired by birth or it's earned, is worth something. And So we're not trying to be unfair to anybody. We're really treating everybody pretty much the same. The point is, the only way you're going to get here is if you have probable cause that this person has committed a very serious offense. I keep saying that, but it is a very serious offense. We're not applying this to jaywalking. These aren't gotcha crimes. These are killing somebody, raping somebody, trafficking a little child. We want them off the street till we know for sure whether the justice system has determined them to be guilty or innocent. If we may err, we may make mistakes, but if we do, we want to make it in the interest of public safety, and that's all we're trying to do here. No, we're not trying to single out anybody or be unfair to anyone, really.
Sure, but fair to say that we, as U.S. citizens, are not necessarily availed to the process that these individuals are going to be availed to. And so therefore, DACA applicants, in fact, are not being treated like U.S. citizens. They're going to be pulled into this particular bill where they're going to be not necessarily enumerated like U.S. citizens, green card holders, parolees of military, and I believe asylum refugees that are actually granted the status as enumerated in that definition, correct?
Gentleman's
That's
time
correct.
has expired.
Thank you, Chairman.
Mr. Speaker, I move to table.
Mr. Romero to close.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I think a few things that must be said are the words that Chairman Smithy just used when he says that these people are not permanent to this country. And yet this bill, in including these DACA recipients, and thinking about what we're asking here is just to include DACA recipients, people that have been here since they were 1 or 2 years old. What it does, in effect, is it determines that they are a flight risk, which is why bail should not be an option. And in fact, I'll tell you all, the U.S. is their only home. Having 2 brothers and sisters that are dreamers, it took them a long time to become U.S. citizens. And it took them a long time to become legal permanent residents. But they got in line. They want to get in line. And DACA recipients are the first that are willing to say, I'm in line. And the only thing this amendment says is don't put an extra barrier on top. After SJR 5, which we just passed overwhelmingly, I want you guys to understand that this is, they're not a flight risk.
Mr. Speaker,
Submitted for what purpose?
will the gentleman yield for some questions?
Gentleman yield for questions?
I do.
He yields for questions.
Thank you, Mr. Romero. And I kind of want to distill down what you just said. The underpinnings of SJR 1 is, I think what's been stated here on the floor, correct me if I'm wrong, is that there's certain populations that are de facto flight risks.
Correct.
And we just finished up a debate on SJR 5, which includes, unless I'm wrong, correct me if I'm wrong, it includes all the offenses that we're discussing in SJR 1 as well.
Correct.
And so what you're asking the body is, where does this particular population fit? It doesn't mean that there is you're not saying that they should not be held to account on any of these serious offenses, are you?
Absolutely not.
What you're saying is this population, DACA population, who, as you stated, knows no other home but this place, should be housed under the terms of SJR 5, which has individualized determination.
Correct.
And not under an automatic denial of bail, which is defining them as a de facto flight risk. Is that correct?
That's right. And I would hope that the body is listening and understands just how American these kids are, and just how American they have to prove every day that they're more American than anywhere else. When those kids say, I'm not from Mexico or whatever other country, I'm not from there or here, they're not a flight risk. They are doing more to stay here, to be safe, to be secure, to not break the laws. But if they end up in a position where they are accused of a situation like this, I don't think that they should be included because of SJR 5, to your point, that they will be just like every other American, which is what they've been trying to prove their entire lives.
Yeah, and that's why I want to distill down. this is not removing any of these individuals from accountability on serious offenses.
No.
It is saying, rather than an outright denial, which is based on flight risk or de facto flight risk, we would prefer this population be housed in the determination that would be made under the terms of SJR 5, which we just passed.
Absolutely.
So-
Speaker Moody, I think for the last two amendments that we've had, including this one, it's just simply about cleaning this bill up to a point to where folks that should not be included in it are clear. They're already addressed in SGR 5. These should be simple amendments. I would hope that the body would vote in favor.
Thank you, Mr.
Thank
Romero.
Move adoption.
Mr. Speaker,
Mr. Rosenthal, for what
does
purpose?
the gentleman yield for some questions?
Gentleman yield for questions?
I'll yield.
Yield.
Yes.
Thank you, Representative Romero. I just want to make really clear, I'd like you to help me make really clear about the requirements to be a DACA recipient. Okay?
Well, I can tell you that the standards are higher than for you and I. I mean, we were born here with that privilege, and I agree with Chairman Smithy. Citizenship is worth something, and I think that every DACA recipient that knows that they are being gifted an opportunity to remain in this country did so in their application process with the understanding that they would not commit a crime, that they would not get themselves in any trouble, they would remain, kind of a bright light of this country and continue to do the things that we expect from them, until something is proven otherwise. A citizen, but without that documentation. Keep in mind, these kids have been waiting for over a decade now, going on 2 decades, and they've been played as a political football. We probably, those of us that represent Latino communities, we know many of these DACA recipients, and we know how hard they're working. We know they're working in incredible jobs, producing for our economy, and I just want this body to support them and see them as Americans, which they are. They know no other home, Representative Rosenthal.
So thank you for that. Would it surprise you to learn that I have family members and close friends who are DACA recipients?
I would not be surprised.
So I don't know if you would be surprised to learn that I consider them among the best of us. I certainly would never qualify for this program. But let me talk about the young man who's basically a family member, best friend of my 2 kids, okay, who was brought to this country when he was 3 years old. So if you were brought to this country at 3 years old and had never known any life anywhere else and never had any family anywhere else, and he lives in Houston, Texas today, would you consider that person a flight risk?
No.
Like, where do they fly to? Where would they go?
I don't consider these persons flight risks. This is, if you've been here since 3 years old, you're an adult, this is your home, Representative Rosenthal. That's the point that we're making. I think it's been proven by these DACA recipients, by their success in life and their advocacy for their other DACA recipient friends and colleagues and family members. Therefore, I hope that more folks can see and recognize who these kids are. And now look, if they make again, I think to Chairman or Speaker Moody's point, if they find themselves accused of these crimes, as Chairman Smithy has pointed out, and there's reasonable cause, they're already covered under SJR 5. This here is just simply a clarification amendment, and I hope that the author agrees to not table it, which he already says he will, but that the members that have a choice can vote in support of this amendment.
So here's the thing. One last question. To be a DACA recipient, the criminal record requirement is you must not have been convicted of a felony, a significant misdemeanor, or 3 or more misdemeanors. Could we say those are like traffic tickets? These recipients haven't even gotten 3 or more traffic tickets, and the young man I'm talking about has been here for 3 decades.
So they know that if they commit any of those crimes, which are much lesser than these that exist in the base bill, would already cause for them to be removed. So I'd highly doubt that they would be in the position to be here where this bill would affect them. But if they are, SJR 5 addresses it. We don't need another duplicative law that specifically targets them just because they weren't born in this country, even though this is their home. Thank you.
Thank you very much. And I don't know if it's apparent, but I feel strongly about this. I'll be voting for your amendment. Thank you for bringing it.
Thank you, Representative.
Mr. Wally, for what purpose?
Mr. Speaker, would Chairman Romero yield for a few questions?
Gentleman yield for questions?
I yield.
He yields for questions.
In listening to debate, Representative Romero, real world reality can be very harsh for people, particularly with relationships,
Yeah.
right? You could envision a very toxic relationship between a DACA recipient and a U.S. citizen or vice versa, right? Doesn't matter.
It can happen.
And this toxic relationship could impact the immigration status if somebody is falsely accused of some type of abuse or some type of
False
some type of
accusation.
crime, right?
Correct.
Where a DACA recipient that theoretically this is hypothetical, is innocent of any kind of abuse to the U.S. citizen. The U.S. citizen files a criminal complaint or calls the cops. There's a domestic dispute, and there's a dispute on who's at fault.
Yeah, and I think that's the concern, Chairman Wally. We just talked about that. That's where the rubber meets the road, where someone is accused, and because even the point of order that we had was accused, and it's not proven yet. And I think that's to your point. If it's not proven and it's simply because somebody wants to have an advantage or leverage over their spouse in your case, I think that's a very dangerous place for those DACA recipients to be.
And as written, there would be no relief for that person that
They'd be held without bail.
that person committed a particular crime.
That's correct.
In this case, and we're not. I guess what you're saying and what many of us believe is that, of course, if you're charged with capital murder, some of these heinous crimes, you're a repeat offender.
Yeah.
That's going to cover itself in the other bills that we just passed here a few minutes ago. Is that correct?
That's correct. And I think that if DACA recipients are not like the villain that has been made out from this front mic all day, is the people that cross this border and they've got a detainer already. Maybe they didn't go to their court date and now they're just out running around. This is not DACA recipients.
Right.
Everybody knows where DACA recipients are, but to your point, that toxic relationship, a false accusation, that lady may end up in jail with no bond after having done absolutely nothing wrong when she actually is the victim.
Correct.
And I think that is a very gross place in a blind spot that this bill has.
Well,
and we should address it.
let alone no bond, she or he would be detained indefinitely, and more than likely fast-track their deportation because they'll may or may not be an ICE hold on them,
Yeah.
and would be deported,
Yeah.
even though their judicial, their criminal process hasn't been fleshed out.
And I think the reason why I filed this amendment, Chairman Wally, is because
Okay.
we absolutely wanted to point out how safe these individuals are. America is their home. They're not a flight risk, and they're definitely not a danger to society.
Thank you.
Thank you.
The gentleman's time has expired. Mr. Romero sends up an amendment. A motion to table by Mr. Smithy. Record vote. Clerk, ring the bell. Show Mr. Smithy voting aye, Mr. Romero voting nay. Show Ms. Morales voting nay. Have all members voted? Mr. King voting aye. Have all members voted? Have all members voted? 86 ayes, 57 nays. The motion to table prevails.